In this episode, Jenn Smith joins us to speak to us about stories, whose stories are being told and whose stories are emerging.
My name is Jenn Smith, and I work at the Berkshire Eagle, and I'm here to talk about how we can make our stories matter in this time, and how we can make sure that we're not missing really important voices. We are living in tremendous times of challenge, of change, but also opportunity. As a journalist here in this community, I want to ask you, how do you think your organization is able to change with the turning tides? And how you will be able to tell your story not just a week from now or a month from now, but maybe even 5 years from now, about how your organization was able to stay resilient and is able to contribute to this community. Over the last 15 years at the Berkshire Eagle, I've covered this community through all sorts of occasions and crises. I have witnessed accidents and incidents. I've been able to be there during times of great joy, during cultural revival, and big accomplishments, to times of great sadness, of loss, of tragedy. But the one thing that's always oppressed me about this community is its ability to be resilient. And so I guess that's what I'm here for today, to encourage you to pause and reflect back on what makes your institutions, your organizations resilient, and how you tell those stories. At the end of the day, it's not about, how you prepared and plan to try to make things work out in the most ideal fashion. It's about how you're able to roll with the tides, to take some hits and to get back up again. And to be able to share that with the community in an authentic way that everyone can learn from is really the kind of storytelling that we as journalists and you as community organizations can benefit from. So here's a few things to think about when you're reaching out to the media. There are basically 3 quintessential questions you should be asking yourself. Why is telling my story important? Why should I be telling this story now? And why does my story matter? If you can answer all 3, give us a call. But if you can't, take your time to think about that a little bit more. And then when you do make that call to pitch your story, ask yourself this 4th question. What evidence can I put out that backs up what I have to say? If a story is based on good information, then the rest of that human interest part will come naturally. There are so many organizations vying for our attention right now, and it's great, but often we're only hearing part of the story. We're hearing from the people at the top of the organization, and those voices definitely matter. But what you have to think about when you're sharing your story is what sources you're sharing with us as well. And so when you're sharing your stories, and you have to think about who's telling them. You have to make sure that the people you employ and the people that are impacted by the work that you do are also having their voices heard. And that's where you come in. It's your responsibility to help amplify those voices so that people are not only reading a story about what's happening in the community, but they have good context and they can really see the impact. So what we know about Berkshire County in the past 10 years is that our demographics are changing. We have more people who have migrated from a lot of different places, from Spanish-speaking countries to Asian countries, to African communities that all have a place here. Maybe not in the numbers as big as a metropolitan area like Boston or New York or Chicago, but nevertheless, these are people in our community who are changing the culture that we have here. And it's our responsibility, both you as an organization and for us as a media outlet, to acknowledge that. So when you think about representation, it's important to let the people doing the work speak for themselves. And what happens, the sort of magic that happens when that occurs, is suddenly you're welcoming everyone to share their authentic experiences. And when that happens, suddenly people start feeling empowered. They feel recognized. They feel acknowledged. And when that happens, we start redefining who we are in our community. We not only get a better sense of place, but we have a better sense of belonging. And I think that's what the work that you're all doing as organizational leaders are trying to achieve. But if we're not achieving that in the stories that we tell, the stories that we're sharing with the media, then that moment of magic and meaning is lost. So if we're not supporting our communities across the board, whether it's getting them back to work, whether we're making sure that everyone's getting a paycheck, that they're getting food, that they're not getting kicked out of housing, that is something that we have to watch and make sure that everyone's getting a fighting chance for. Because if everyone is not elevated and given the safety net that they deserve, then that's when those problems are really going to become prolonged. And that's when the story, that positive story of resilience and outcome and hope that we're hoping for, starts to turn sour. So again, that's why it's important for us to hear from you and hear these stories in action. And again, hear authentically from people how they're being impacted. If we're not telling the truths, no matter how uncomfortable they make us, then we're not doing anyone a service. We're doing them an injustice. For a long time, I think there's been this developing distrust in the media. And a lot of times when you hear that catchphrase, I think it refers more so to big media, like the CNNs and New York Timeses and other Fox Newses of the world. But I really want you to remember that local media exists for a reason. Number one, you're supporting it. Without your support, we wouldn't be here. But we need your support now more than ever to tell your stories truthfully and factually and authentically. And by support, I'm not just talking about your dollars. I'm talking about your trust. When we have your trust, it makes us more credible. When we have a good working relationship, not just on demand, like, hey, we're doing this now, you need to come here and cover it. Start a relationship with us now. Reach out anytime. Our numbers are out on websites, we're out on Twitter, we're out on social media. Let us know who you are now, and we can let you know who we are and how we work and what we're doing. Now is the time not to put up walls and fences, but to break down barriers and build better relationships. We are a reflection of our community. And so I want you to hold us accountable. Don't be afraid, just as we call out, bad reactions or bad behaviors of figures and decision makers in our community, you have just as much of a right to call us out and hold us accountable and say, hey, you're missing this angle, you're missing this story, you're missing this voice. We want you to be an active part of who we are. And if we don't have you as an ally, again, we're not going to be here for long. And at the end of the day, it's not the CNNs and the big media that are going to change this community. It's you and it's us.